live stream.
Already?
They have a way of telling us Becca's gonna go first because she's got to scoot out.
Okay.
And I guess unless anybody else is in a rush, we'll just go right down to the order.
Are there something specific we're supposed to talk about?
Name,
Okay.
title, affiliation,
Okay.
projects you work on, kind of skills that are needed for those projects.
Okay.
And if you're out, try to chime in too. But if someone wants to do what you're doing, what advice can you give to grad students about how to get their foot in the door? So series of courses, skills that they want to develop.
Okay. Okay.
But it picks up every single time.
So hopefully they'll go this way.
Oh, I can go second.
So yeah. Well, I guess it gives me less time to just freak out about what I'm doing.
There's one more person coming. I figure it looks weird to have us separated. There were supposed to be two people that were going to go right here.
See, I took a lot of courses. I know, I heard a lot. I never have interest in it, but now I regret because that's what we're doing. So I may take a course, but for spring it's kind of tight. I think I'll let it finish. You work at the UIC, right?
Yep.
No, I work for the Dallas National Board, so I do.
All right, everybody, we're going to officially begin here. So welcome. Welcome to everybody that's here, and then welcome to everyone that is live streaming. My name is Sean Betcher. I work for the UIC Extended Campus. I've been working with Dr. Smith, who I'm going to be introducing here for some time on the MESA program. But today's seminar is entitled I have to use my notes here. Proseminar in Educational Psychology, Socialization into the MESA and HDL Fields. So again, we have all of you that are current students joining us, current and prospective students streaming online as well, and then our panel here. I'm not going to take up too much time, so just here to say welcome. But really I'm here to introduce Dr. Smith, who will then in turn introduce most of our panel, and then we will get going. So Dr. Smith serves as a professor in the Department of Educational Psychology in the UIC College of Education and specializes in psychometrics, specifically Roche measurement. So Dr. Smith, I'll turn it over to you, and again, welcome everyone.
Thanks, Sean, and welcome. It's nice to see a nice crowd here and all the people on live stream. And if Dunkin' Donuts is watching, I could use a free lifetime card if you're out there. This is our pretty much annual get-together. I think we've done it the last 2 years. We took a couple of years off, but our annual get-together of colleagues and former students who are now colleagues working in the MESA and HDL fields. So MESA is measurement, evaluation, statistics, and assessment. HDL is human development and learning. Those are the two PhD programs we have in the Department of Educational Psychology. Our other graduate programs at a master's level are MESA, again, both in an online and the campus format, youth development and early childhood education. So most of the panel up here represents the MESNA and then the HDL. both at the master's and at the PhD level. And so every year I try to ask colleagues to come in and basically share the basics, so name, affiliation, and their title, what their job responsibilities entail, so what type of skills that they need in their field. In some cases where they've worked at multiple positions, like Andrew here, he'll tell you the types of skills he needed at both his jobs, because they're both Mesa oriented. And then basically to try to give those that are interested to get a foothold in the Mesa or HDL field, what kind of advice they can give to master's or doc students as to the types of courses they might want to focus on, the types of activities they might want to engage in as graduate students to get their foot in the door in their respective fields. We have about 10 minutes each for each person. I'll let each one go, and in turn, after they're presenting, if there's any Q&A, and then we'll have some time at the end for some Q&A as well. Now, I'm going to let Becca go first, because she's got to scoot out a bit early, so if you see on camera her sneaking out, it's nothing to worry about. She just needs to get off to another appointment. So, Becca?
Great. So my name is Rebecca Levin, and thank you. And I work at the Robert R. McCormick Foundation, and I'm the Director of Evaluation and Learning for the Foundation. My responsibilities at the Foundation are both to serve our staff, and we have about 35, 40 staff who work in the philanthropy side of the Foundation, to help them with evaluation, help them to use evaluation to assess their own work, to assess their own strategies and their own effectiveness, and then to work with many of our grantees and other NGOs who are using evaluation to help them use evaluation to serve their needs, to help drive their own strategies, and to drive their own assessments. Prior to working there, I worked at UIC and taught evaluation here, and then did large evaluations for the College of Education and Social Work. And then prior to that, I worked at and then ran an applied research center that was focused on social and economic justice. What I would say in terms of the needs of people working in the kinds of positions that I have worked in is to be widely trained across disciplines, both across qualitative as well as quantitative analysis. When I was doing evaluation, it was critical for me to be able to walk into a situation and assess what were the needs of the organization that I was serving. Many times they would come to me and say, this is what we need, and when we would parse it further to what exactly were they hoping to get out of it, it would turn out that their needs were slightly different or very different than what they had thought initially. And so having within your own repertoire both skills in quantitative as well as qualitative analysis makes it much more easy for you to be able to figure out how could evaluation serve the needs of your organizations and what they were doing. In the role that I am right now, having a lot of evaluation experience under your belt, it would be absolutely necessary. I would say you need 8 to 10 years minimum of working in evaluation so that you are very familiar with the array of evaluation techniques and approaches that are possible to be able to deal with the very wide range of evaluation demands that come to a person in this role within a foundation that is as large as ours is. So I think those are the major things that are important for the work that I do. I would say that the notion and skill of cultural competency has never been greater. There's never been a greater need for it than it is right now. For a very long time, evaluation has earned its very bad reputation as being a something done to organizations that undermines them. And oftentimes that was because it was done with such a heavy hand and a lack of understanding of the communities that we were doing the work within. And so particularly given the work that we're doing at our foundation, where so much of our work is focused on communities of color. As a white woman going into communities of color, it is paramount for me to have an awareness of what are the different perspectives that I am going to be having than people of color who are living within those communities, and just being a person of color isn't sufficient to make you culturally aware either, right? People come from very different backgrounds, and having an understanding of the organizations and of the communities that we're working in is critical. And so it's a lot of, I think there's a lot of work that has to be done to get, to move beyond the basic skills in one methodology or another to start understanding how do you engage in communities that are quite diverse, and certainly beyond whatever you are, whoever you are, you're going to be working in areas where you're out of your zone of familiarity, and you need to know how to do that and do that well, or know when to step back because you're not able to do so. I think that's.
Are you able to share any of the projects that the McCormick Foundation is working on, so they
Yeah.
get an idea what you're up to?
Yeah, so McCormick Foundation funds about $80 million a year in projects from early childhood education, democracy, there's a whole wide range of projects in the area of communities, ranging from health and wellness to English as a second language programs. It's quite a variety. And then a whole group of projects having to do with veterans. So I'm right now reviewing all of the grants that go to our board that are at $100,000 or more, which is a large number of grants having to do with democracy. So I'm looking at grants having to do with the media, with First Amendment rights, with doing training of librarians in 21st century skills to work with communities of color on the west and south sides who may not have those skills baked into their librarian capacities at this point. It's a very, very wide range of programs that we fund. And so my job as an evaluator is to read and learn about every one of the programs that I'm assessing, and then do an assessment of whether or not the evaluation as they've conceived it is actually serving them. Or is it just being done in a way that is like barking for the foundation, like give them whatever they want so they get off our backs? And my job is to advocate for the organizations and say, you know what? I don't see how this evaluation is doing anything except being a time sucker or an energy suck for you. I don't see how it's actually serving you. How do we make this evaluation actually serve you, as well as help our staff know whether or not what they're doing is going in the right direction? So it's quite a variety of areas that we work within.
I always had a question, because like we have a lot of students, and it's been more and more over the years that are coming in for the E part of MESA, the evaluation part. And if they want to be like an independent evaluator, what level of stats knowledge do they need? Is it just beyond the intro stats? Do they need like ANOVA, regression, multivariate, or can they stop somewhere in between there?
So it depends on where you're working, if you want to be an independent evaluator. I mean, there's some evaluators who work in one particular area and they become expert in that area, and they end up going very, very deep in quantitative areas, and it's important for them to have those quantitative skills. In the work that I've done, both at the foundation as well as when I was running the Applied Research Center, the level of statistics that I needed and that I used was at a much lower level. At a regression analysis was about the depth of statistical work that we ended up using, though I've been called on to, especially within the foundation, to analyze data that's being presented to the foundation or proposals that are presented to the foundation that have a lot of statistical data supporting them. And I have to have the sophistication to be able to look at those reports and look at what it is that they're doing and say, is what they're doing actually supportive of what's going on? Or are they using methodologies that make sense? Or is what they're saying supported by the data that they've got? And that's pushed me sometimes beyond actually my own levels of comfort, and I've had to do some work to try to figure out what's going on, or call friends who are stronger in those areas to look at it with me and say, okay, is this legit? Does this make sense? But for the work that I'm doing, regression analysis and using very simple statistics has been sufficient.
Before we open it up to any questions for Rebecca, I wanted to say, I mean, over the years, we've had our one core program evaluation course, and it's always maxed out every single year for their enrollments. And we ask our students periodically for their we don't do it just to make you feel good about we're asking you something. We actually take into an account. But they all came back saying we'd like a follow-up course to the program evaluation course. So I think it was 2 years ago, we rolled out the qualitative data analysis course. And so that was supposed to be built as a complement to the PE course. And demand is still quite high, and so we've hired a program evaluation assistant professor who you've met, and she's going to be rolling out, Dr. Tisdale, if you want to look her up on our homepage. She'll be rolling out 2 more evaluation courses over the next 2 years. So we're trying to build that part of the MESA, the E part of the MESA out a bit more, especially since the demand is so high for evaluators out there.
And there are a fair number of evaluators out there who don't have training in evaluation, right? And that I find highly problematic, because the assumptions that people make or that I make when I send in an evaluator, or I recommend an evaluator, or I hire an evaluator, is that they have the spectrum of not only knowledge, but they've worked in these areas. And many people are what we're calling accidental evaluators, where they find themselves working as an evaluator because somebody needed some data management, somebody needed information for a funder, and so they pulled them in and they become the evaluator on top of the program implementer, or on top of the development person, or whatever. And so the more that you can get training specifically in the field of evaluation, as I said earlier, across the spectrum of methodologies, the more able you will be to fill the needs of people who are asking you for evaluation services. I guess the one other thing I would emphasize is that we need more people of color in evaluation. As I said earlier, being culturally competent is really important, but we need more Black and brown evaluators. And any of you who know people who are interested in this, who would be interested in considering this as a profession, it's critical in a city like Chicago for me to have a very small handful of Black and brown evaluators that I know who I can recommend to people is highly problematic. And so we're right now working with Rebecca and with a whole group of people to create a process to bring more Black and brown people into the field, to help them know about it, that it exists even, and then to encourage them to get the requisite training and experience so they can work in it, because it's not okay the way that it is right now. We're just way too imbalanced with white evaluators.
I think getting the word out is one of the harder parts, because if you look at the MESNA, there's really only the S at an undergrad level. You can get a degree in stats, and not too many people are eager to get a degree in stats. And so I think that's why there's a real dearth of people to fill all these positions, is because at the undergrad level, folks aren't even aware of the MESA fields.
Right.
So getting the word out is a key part too. But employers always want, you may be able to get your foot in the door with an undergrad degree, but they're always going to want you to go on for your master's or your doctorate if you want to move up the ladder in any of these MESA or HDL types of fields.
Right.
And any questions for Rebecca? How can I get on the list for the grants for the McCormick Foundation?
Yeah.
No? No. Okay. Well, thank you. I have to scoot out.
All right. Thanks very much.
for coming again.
All right.
I'm going to now pass it along to Andrew.
Well, you said you were going this way.
Oh, you want to go down there?
No, that's fine. I can go next.
You're up next then, Andrew.
Okay. It surprised me a little bit. Okay, so I'm Andrew Swanland. I got my PhD in Ed Psych about 3 years ago, almost exactly 3 years ago. I think it was December 6th of 2016, but I was working on it, not actively, for about 10 or 11 years. I was
Yeah, he's one of those.
yeah, 3 years of courses and then 8 years of hanging around, but so I don't recommend that. But I was working full-time at the time in the field of research and evaluation. I wouldn't say I was an accidental evaluator, but I absolutely was an accidental evaluator. However, I work for a large organization, so we have a fair amount of people with the right amount of competencies to be doing research and evaluation. So I work for the American Institutes for Research, which is a large social science contract research organization, not-for-profit, based in Washington, D.C., although we have offices around the country and internationally. Primarily, we are focused on 2 lines of work. One we call our professional services group, which is really our social science research, and also our policy, practice, and systems change area, which is like technical assistance and policy supports for educators in the field. We do a lot of mostly education research, although we do work in health and some other areas. Workforce development is another area where you have psychometricians in the organization. The other half of the organization was K-12 assessment, NCLB assessments, although that's not the name of the law anymore, but that's where they all started. AIR is now divested from that group, so to focus more on our mission, which is to conduct the best social science research and bring research to practice, both in the US and internationally, with a focus on the disadvantaged. My area of the organization, I'm a principal researcher, and I work, again, primarily within education. I've been with AIR for 15 years, and I work in both research and evaluation, and typically my evaluation is large-scale summative evaluation on federal grants. In addition to that, I do a fair amount of measurement work, primarily survey-based. So I'm involved with a couple large survey projects. One is with the Boy Scouts, which is now called Scouting BSA, because now it's both for boys and girls, so they've changed their name. But they are conducting a large-scale survey of their troops and adult volunteers, so both their youth and their adult volunteers, looking at, they have a very, very large logic model about how adult training and adult perspectives and adult self-rated traits interact with youth development. And so that's a three-way survey that we're conducting, and that's a huge logistic task, but I just get the data set, so that's the nice part. And then I work a lot in school climate research. So I very much have a generalist background in that I'm trained in statistics. That's my master's degree is in statistics, and my PhD is in measurement. And I also do a lot of research design. So I'm doing, I lead studies, or I am the sort of technical lead for a lot of studies in a variety of content areas. So I work in early childhood, I work in youth development, as I said, I work in school climate, I work in teacher professional development, and then kind of whatever else is thrown at me. I'm trying to think, after school programming. Yeah, so there's a wide variety of stuff, and I am not an expert in any of those content areas. For the most part, youth development would be if I were to lean on something, and I'm not an expert in youth development. AIR has, it's unclear how many employees we have at the moment because we just divested of half the organization, but roughly I would say there's 900 remaining, and there is in-depth knowledge on all kinds of stuff. Methodologically speaking, we have psychometricians and statisticians, but we also have economists, and so we have statisticians and economists talking to each other, and they don't always talk the same language. But so you have, the nice thing about an organization like AIR is you have lots and lots of people that you can work with in a collaborative environment for the most part. And when I mean, it's an organization, there's obviously sometimes where there's a lack of collaboration, but it's different from academia where it might be more isolating to be doing your research because people are competing directly with one another, even though it's not, I mean, everyone's going for tenure, right?
Not anymore.
Yeah, not you. But so there are experts in many fields that you can reach out to. So I've indicated that I actually had two fields. One actually predated my time at UIC, but was the reason I came here, which I worked for a K-12 testing company in their psychometric services department. So I worked with PhD psychometricians. I had no idea that field even existed until I was in it. I just had a master's degree in statistics, and so I learned measurement models on the job, and then to move up in that field, you'd need to get a PhD. So I came here to UIC because I had some connections with F. Smith, and spent my 11 years here. In the meantime, was working this research and evaluation job, and then that appealed to me more in the end, and I stuck with that. So that's how I ended up here. The skill set that I need to do my job, generally I use a lot of Roche measurement, but I also use other types of psychometrics, like factor analysis, things like that. General statistical knowledge of things like standard regression models, hierarchical linear modeling, things like that. Research design, so I actually lead 2 large randomized control trials that are both conducted in about 50 to 60 schools each that are spread across many states. So doing these sort of causal research type studies, but then also a lot of quasi-experimental design. So over time I've picked up things like propensity score modeling or imperative interrupted time series design, and let's name another one. Those are the big two quasi-experimental designs that people are using. So that's sort of the who I am. I've managed, despite being there for 15 years and moving up to a senior level, to still get to actually analyze data, which is nice. It's not all just telling other people to do stuff, which I find pretty boring, and I think is something that as you move up in an organization, you get less and less. You don't interact with data anymore, and you're not doing the work. You're mostly managing the work. So I still get to do a lot of analysis, which, as a data guy, I like. What did I miss from what I was supposed to say?
No, I think you covered quite a bit of it. I think because we have a MESA listserv, and it's got everybody from, I think I started the PhD program in 98 or 99, something like that. So we have except that one person who signed off. Everybody that's been in our program since 98, 99 is still in that listserv. And I periodically just get these emails, and I know if you want to move up in that organization, you eventually need to get a PhD. But I think for entry level, because I'm getting emails from students that are getting jobs with AIR, that they're getting in there with a master's.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So AIR hires at the bachelor level, master's level, and the PhD level. Those are the three primary entry points. And they certainly encourage people to get advanced degrees, even if they're entering with a bachelor's degree.
Right.
You can move up in the organization. It's harder, but with time. And I moved up without my PhD. I had the advantage of saying I've completed all my coursework, and it's imminent for about 5 years. They're like, how imminent is it really? Like, I can show you, I have 100 pages. But yes, I was able to move up. And a lot of it was through what I picked up on the job. So being able to work and take courses here was one of the real pluses, I think, because the courses are at night, and I work, I don't know, 10 blocks away over in the West Loop. So that was nice for me. But I mean, I know it's also hard to work and get a PhD, hence 11 years. But I did find when I was taking courses that I was just immediately able to apply what I learned in my courses to my job. In particular, skills that were different from the types that I did for my job. So I really liked the philosophy of ed stuff. I really liked the qualitative course, even though I do absolutely no qualitative research whatsoever. But the perspective I was able to gain from that, I think, helped me be a better researcher overall, because I knew how to interact with folks who were doing things different than me, because we do our work in teams. It's very rare that I'm doing something independently. I'm usually working in a team of anywhere from 5 to 25 people in some cases, depending on the size of the study.
I think Andrew mentioned something as well about having to get a PhD to move up in a lot of these organizations. I think historically that's been true, and I think it's still mainly true now. But I scour the job boards every Sunday, not because I'm leaving UIC, and I shoot off the jobs to our MESA listserv. But over the years, I'm seeing more and more employers saying they PhD preferred, because I think, back to what Becca and I were talking about with you folks, that there is no MESA field at the undergrad level. So there's lots of jobs out there for people with quant and qual skills. And I think employers, they want someone with 10 years of experience and a PhD. Those people don't come around very often. So now you can actually move up in a lot of these organizations with a master's. Most organizations are still going to want people with a PhD or say they prefer a PhD, but I'm seeing more and more ads of PhD preferred or master's plus experience. So I think it's shifting a little bit simply because there's too many jobs and not enough people to fill them out there.
Right, and for AIR does a lot of active data collection. As a large organization, that's one of the things we can do is go out and conduct 400 classroom observations in a 1-month period in New York City, for example. That requires a lot of staff. So primarily our bachelor and master's degree folks are the people who are collecting those data, and they're trained in whatever data collection is necessary. So doing interviews, things like that. So yeah, and then throughout, over time, as part of a project team, you move on to additional, more challenging tasks and gain experience and learn project management and learn how to do budgeting. And that may not sound exciting when we're talking about educational psychology, but that's the reality of running a large-scale project, or those are those things need to happen. And in an organization like AIR, there's generally not dedicated project managers or trained in project management, and that's what they do. We need people with education research skills in those roles to understand the context.
Any questions for Andrew and either his work at AIR or the K-12 testing organization? No? Okay, thanks, Andrew. Up next.
Yes. Hi everyone, my name is Miss Cleese. I'm the clinical assistant professor and an assessment coordinator in the UIC University Library. I obtained my PhD in educational psychology last year, specializing in human development learning. And when I working on my PhD, I also completed my master's in MESA as well. So my primary responsibilities as assessment coordinators include I plan, design, and then also implement of the library assessment initiatives in collaboration with various stakeholders, including library senior leadership teams and also steering committee, assessment advisory committee. And also I design and implement of the regular assessment like surveys for the faculty and student. And some of the faculty here already received a survey earlier this year. We wanted to make sure that what our users need, and through the survey, measuring it, and then improve our services and resources better. And once we receive those survey results, we try to use those data to implement and improve our services as well. And another part of using the survey is to measure the library impact in student and faculty success. So that's the part that requires the statistical skill, analytic skills as well. And another part that I'm doing for my responsibility is I assist the library staff with the assessment through the one-on-one consultation, and also I present the workshops, professional development workshops for the library staff. So the library organization has about like 150 staff and faculty. So when we think about the faculty position, we assume that they require the PhD. Apparently in the master's library field, they don't require the PhD. The terminal degree should be the Master's of the Library Science. PhD is more about like a very specific position, like a library assessment coordinator, like a need more strong quantitative and qualitative analytic skills to assessment. So it is not necessarily required a PhD. However, the library it tried to shift the bringing more professions with have a strong skills, like I mentioned about the qualitative and quantitative. So it doesn't require the PhD to be the faculty. So for them, it'll be more like my position is more like overqualified, but still they wanted to have the professions who have the strong skills. And the job prospects for this position is another part is when we look at the job descriptions, I think it'll be good to have the project management skills they required, and also data visualization. Because when you analyze the data, how are you going to communicate with your stakeholders? You have a wonderful writing skills, however, how are you going to deliver those findings to the audience or readers? So I think that's very important part to be prepared. And one of the questions that Ev mentioned, how does the MESA courses help me out? And honestly, all of the courses that I've taken through the program was very, very helpful. And one of the innovative questions that I received from my colleague was, are you born with a number, good at numbers, or are you born with mathematics? And then I said, no, it is not. I always have to go back to my materials and refer back, understand, because I don't memorize every single details.
What?
like professors provide wonderful sources, and then I saved every information. And when I need, I go back and oh, this is what I meant. Even when I was a student, I just focusing on finishing, getting a good grade, just doing the exam. That's all I focused on. But when I'm in the real field, I have to apply those concepts into the real situation. So I think those resources you learned, even though you didn't master, but you still need it when you work. So I think whenever you take a courses, make sure to save all the information and reach out to people who took the course at the same time. And another part I'd like to mention is the take advantage of, like, take an opportunity, like doing the internship during the graduate programs. For example, like she worked at the YMCA, and then I also worked as an intern, and that's how I learned about the field. Because once you experience as an intern, you will understand what they require, what they're expecting for you to perform. So even though it's a short amount of like time, one semester over the summer, I think those information is very helpful, whether or not you determine you go to the field. So internship is very important. Another part is read the journal articles that were the field that you are interested in, because they will tell you what are the statistical analysis that are the current trends in that specific field. In the library field, like Rebecca mentioned, like a McCormick Foundation or like an evaluator field, we don't require the advanced statistical skills. But if you know higher level, actually you can be a pioneer to lead that area. So I think do not hesitate to just limit yourself. Only like my maximum is regression. No, just try to take more classes as much as you want. You don't, like I said earlier, you don't have to master, but at least you have all the resources that you can reach out. So those are the things that I would like to highlight it. Since I've been working at the library like 15 months, that is my first job after I graduated. So one thing that I would like to highlight as a new student is the keep an eye on the job advertisement, because that tells what the current skills they require. Like if you're interested about the data analysis, to take a look at the position. You don't have to limit, oh, this is the medical area, oh, this is the library area. But regardless of the area, they will tell what are the common skills they require. I mentioned earlier, they require the project management skills, and as well as the data visualization skills as well. And also, if you know more advanced skills like software skills like R, Python, then you will have more ability you can do with that. So those are the I wanted to highlight.
I think before we open it up to questions for Jung Mi, two things that you brought up. One, your assessment in a library. Mm-hmm. And I didn't even know that kind of field existed up until, I'm going to say it's about 4 or 5 years ago, where one of our applicants, she was a librarian coming back for a master's in Mesa. And I was like, Is she really applying for the right degree? And then I learned more and more about it, that these libraries do have some of them have large assessment divisions. So over the years, we've gotten more and more librarians coming back for either the certificate, which is just a shorter sequence of classes, usually 3 or 4 classes, or they come back for the full master's. Mm-hmm. So that was an interesting field to be introduced to, because I wasn't aware of that initially. But you also represent someone who's getting a PhD in a non-Mesa field, and then a master's simultaneously in Mesa. And I think it varies year to year, but about 10 or 15% of our population are folks like you. So they'll be getting a degree in PhD in SPED, policy, curriculum instruction, or HDL in your case. Mm-hmm. They typically like research, these students, and they quite often realize they're not getting enough research methodology skills, whether it's in the MES or A aspect. And so they're willing to be poor for another year or so while they simultaneously get a master's in Mesa, because they realize when they get out, let's say you have your PhD in HDL, someone else has got another PhD in HDL, what's going to separate you from that other person. If you have a master's in Mesa, there is very, very low chance, low probability that they're going to come close to matching you as far as research skills are. So if you're going after a research position, it's going to be a no-brainer for the prospective employer. So if you can stomach being poor for another year, for that 10-15% of the folks out there that want to get more quantitative skills, you should consider a simultaneous degree in Mesa, like you did.
Right. So like a PhD program really helped me to be an independent researcher. So without those training for over the years, I could not be confident to be independent researcher. So like even though I introduced as assessment coordinator, my goal is like always whenever I complete my work, I always try to aim for the publications and try to collaborate with other colleagues, because like in the library field, as I mentioned, not many people have the skills with statistical analytics skills. So they need that skills, like how do you design how do you design your project program, and how do you make the paper like a research design, and how do you apply like IRB materials as well. So another part that I missed was like any faculty who wanted to developed their own project as a research paper, I also helped them like writing the IRB materials as well. So like IRB materials also include those informations like how to protect humans like privacy and their rights. So those informations are very helpful through the PhD program. Without that training, I think it will be harder, or even it'll be harder for me to achieve my own personal goal as well.
Any questions?
Yes.
Yes. Did you make the decision to not go into academia, or did you simultaneously aim for academia and outside of academia? How did you make that decision?
That was a good question. So my academic advisor, Dr. Humphries, is here. When I was working on my PhD, I focused on completing the course. That was my main goal. So in other words, that I didn't aim for the publication during the program. So if I don't have enough publication by the time I graduate, it'll be really hard to go to the tenure track, faculty position. So I did not aim for that position, but it was like a more coincidentally happen that certain field does not require the publications to be the faculty position. So yeah, I didn't plan for doing that, but during the program, taking the courses and doing the internship helped me to open my eyes that after graduating, going to the tenure track or being a faculty is not the only way. There is Andrew said there's a different area, going to the different nonprofit organizations, conducting the research and analyzing the data. There's so many ways you can do. So I think it'll be good to not to limit yourself that, I should go this track. If you really want to go to the track, then you have to be prepared, including the publications, before you graduate.
Anything else? I'm going to chime in just a little bit before I get to you, Kate, okay? When we're filling out this panel, I try to get the people that represent HDL and the MESNA, but I also try to get people that represent different fields. And unfortunately, this year, we had a couple of folks that had to bail at the last second because of family and illnesses. But one aspect that's not represented up here, except for myself right now, is academia. So and for academia, you're going to need the PhD. Although I think at some smaller colleges and universities, you could probably get away with the master's. But more Division III and Division I universities are going to want the PhD. And graduates from our Ed Psych program, both HDL and Mesa, have gone on to academia as well. And Marisha, maybe your experience, since you're a newer faculty member than I am, but when I was coming out, it was like, if you want to go academia, you better go for it right out of school. Because if you're out of academia for 5 or 10 years and you're working in the private sector, it's a hell of a lot harder to get into academia after that. Your best shot to get into academia is going to be right out of grad school. And in grad school, you better be cranking out the pubs with your advisor and whoever else is on your committee, trying to write some grants. Don't have to hit them, but get some experience writing grants. Travel to all the conferences, do some presentations. Because when we do these faculty searches, I mean, when I first came out, and this was a long time ago, if you had 2 or 3 presentations in 2 or 3 pubs, you're considered a pretty good candidate. Now that's not going to cut it. I'm looking at the like Rebecca, who we just hired for program evaluation. She probably had a dozen pubs, a dozen presentations, several grants already on her CV. So it's getting, I think, a lot more competitive. But if you have aspirations for academia, gear your grad school for that. Be willing to stay in school and on an RA salary for 4 or 5 years, which is going to suck. But the long-term benefits would pay off, because if you're working full-time and trying to crank out pubs and grants, that's very difficult. Try to be a full-time student, and unfortunately kind of poor. But the long-term prospects, again, will be much better if you can do that. So that's the academia component. We have students that go to academia. I think another component that's not represented up here is the healthcare industry. Another portion of our MESA population, well, historically, MESA-type programs are housed in educational psychology or a quantitative psych department. But they draw students from all over the university to come to our areas, either quantitative psych or MESA, to get the quant skills. Then they go back to their home fields and be kind of like the go-to research person. So I'd say, and it varies again year to year, 5-10% maybe of our MESA population are folks who want nothing to do with education. They just want the quant skills. They come and get the quant skills, and they go back to physical therapy. They'll go back to the rehab departments to be the research person in those areas. So healthcare is another area where there's a lot of job opportunities as well. You might be competing against some folks who get their degrees in biostats. Those folks are mainly evaluating clinical trials. So nice clean data. They don't deal with the messy data that we have in the social sciences. So in MESA, I think the attraction is you don't get as much stats as you would a degree in biostats, but you get the M, E, and A as well, and you learn how to deal with messy real life data rather than clinical trial data. I think that's it. Sorry, Kate.
Yeah.
Hand it off to you now.
Okay. Hi, I'm Kate Cahill. I have a master's degree through the MESA program. I graduated in 2014, I think. I kept taking classes, though, and now I just started the doctoral program here. I work in certification. I work for the Dental Assisting National Board, and so we certify dental assistants throughout the United States. So a little bit about the certification field. I am definitely an accidental psychometrician. I started an organization that was a nonprofit, thought it was a great place to work, and they're like, hey, we have this job, we want you to apply for it. I'm like, I don't know anything about psychometrics at all. And they're like, you'll learn, and I did. And then I also came here and learned a lot more. Thank you, Google Drive, also, because I pretty much think I have every class archived on Google Drive, including some of Carol's, and I still use them all of the time. I'm like, okay, I'm going to go do this thing. I need to go look at Carol's things or, other classes here. So I work at a small organization in certification. We keep all of our psychometrics in-house, which is becoming less and less the case, I think. I think a lot of people are going to services and consulting versus keeping them in-house. So because we keep everything in-house, I do a little bit of everything. So I do surveys, I do analysis, I do the whole exam development, I do publication, I do reporting, I do figuring out how to get the information into our database management system. So because it's a small organization, I do all of that. So they also rely on all the different classes that I took through the MESA program, whether it was survey research or quant IRT classes. So I use all of that, which is why it's all on Google Drive, so I can go and make sure I'm doing it correctly. I think the other thing that I got from the MESA program was I did both online courses and then in-person courses, and I really enjoyed the in-person courses because then I got to meet people. one of the things that I think I would recommend is make sure you meet people, because you're going to have questions. You're going to want to ask people about certain things that you're not aware of. And one of the best resources is asking your fellow students or classmates or somebody who used to go through the program that somebody knows. And they're like, oh, you should talk to this person in the field. And we're all connected. I just went to a conference 3 weeks ago, the Institute for Credentialing Excellence Exchange in San Diego, and I sat down to dinner, and half the people at the table had gone through the UIC Mesa program or had taken classes through them. And so we were talking about whose classes we took and what we did, and so that's a great resource to have, is to be able to talk to all those different people, to have that connection. Did I cover everything? What else did you want me to talk about?
I mean, you started Danby with
Yeah.
with your master's. I mean, what types of skills or what types of introductory courses would you recommend the students so they can get a foot in the door in these kind of certification organizations?
So right now, as I said, I was an accidental. So I actually, when I started at Danby, I only had a bachelor's degree, and it was actually in history. And I learned a lot of things in the job, but then also took classes at the same time so that I could reinforce that knowledge and learn other ways in which to do things. I think currently in the field for certifications, as you said, it used to be you used to have a PhD to be a psychometrician. There is so much demand right now for people who have psychometric skill sets that right now it is master's plus education for a lot of them now. I think right now most of the listings are saying we prefer a PhD, but if you have a master's degree, and maybe if you have like 5 to 7 years experience, up to 10 years experience, will take you instead of having someone with a PhD. Because they're recognizing people who have on-the-job experience are going to trump anyone who's coming out with just a PhD and who doesn't have really experience working in the field, because there's a little bit of a learning curve. I would also definitely, if you're thinking about doing assessments, definitely take, I think Kirk Becker is teaching it right now, the computer adaptive testing course. The special?
It's not on the books yet,
Oh, sorry.
but last time, he taught it the last time we offered it. Yeah.
Okay. That course was, I think I took it with John Stahl at that time, and it was great. It was a wonderful survey course about a lot of different things and a great reference for anything I want to do in the future. So yeah.
Thanks, Kate. Any questions for Kate? I mean, the certification field is quite broad. How many of you have a license or a certification of practice in something? Most folks? If you're a teacher, you got to have one, right?
Yep.
It's the psychometricians are some of the folks that work on all these assessments.
Yeah. Everything.
Yeah.
You know, laying concrete to working a crane to being a doctor. That's the other thing. Definitely go to conferences. There's a couple different ones. I just went to the ICE Exchange, which is the Institute for Credentialing Excellence Exchange, and then there's ATP. So that's, what's ATP? What's the
Association Testing
Association of
Professionals.
Testing Professionals, which is very large. And definitely also volunteer. Volunteer with both of these organizations so that way you can get to meet other people. And that way, if you have questions about things that come up, you can use them also as a resource. No.
Thanks, Kate. Questions? We're good? Either Danby or the certification field in general? No? Who's next in line down there? Is it Kate? Oh, hi.
So, thanks for having me. It's great to be here. I'm excited that people are as excited about Mesa as I am. So I graduated about 5 years ago with my master's. I chose the Mesa program because I was looking for the degree with the longest name that I could possibly find that I would have to really explain to friends and family. But also I was looking for a great general research methodology degree that I could do in my free time from working full-time during the day, and this program really didn't disappoint. So currently, about 1.5 years ago, I helped found a small boutique consulting firm here in Chicago, and we work primarily with social impact organizations to help them evaluate the work that they're doing, to strengthen the work that they're doing, to build their organizational capacity for measurement and evaluation, as well as help them design programs and trainings for their staff. this degree really prepared me for this work. And prior to starting this consulting business, I spent about 10 years working internally in nonprofit organizations and research and evaluation departments. I would say it's really only been a couple decades that nonprofit organizations have had research and evaluation departments. So I was really fortunate to, be able to start my career this way. I think with the changing context of funding and accountability and the role that data plays just in our society, organizations in the public sector have really had to try to ramp up their skills and ability to participate in that kind of exchange. And so that has resulted in a lot more partnerships with universities, as well as trying to build their own in-house capacity to do that. So I kind of lucked into that work through working both in academic research settings, doing lots and lots of interviews and administering lots and lots of assessments, which is really where I first got interested into how those assessments came about in the first place and who's designing them, and do they know what it's really like to administer this assessment and the data you're getting. So I always kind of had an interest in that, which is what led me to this work. But also in organizational capacity building for learning and evaluation and using data. So I think really any organization can benefit from improving their capacity to understand what's the most important data to collect, how are we using it, who needs to be in the room to have these conversations, what are we doing with what we're learning. But especially, I think, organizations in the public sector who have really not had the benefit or exposure of these types of conversations, it's really critical now that we improve their capacity to do that. So prior to this work and working in research and evaluation in various nonprofit settings, both at the YMCA of the USA, which is our national resource office for the Ys here locally in Chicago, as well as our local chapter of the Y, and prior to that, a community behavioral health organization here in Chicago. I've had lots of exposure to different types of programming and different types of measurement, and both working internally as an evaluator as well as externally with evaluators to evaluate our programs. So kind of an exposure to a wide array of the different types of research and evaluation that happens in these organizations. So although I really focus on the E of the MESA, I have relied a lot on what I learned in measurement theory classes. I would say with this program, it really opened my eyes to a new way of thinking and really changed my perspective around just asking new questions and better questions, improving the way that I designed or adapted instruments. So something that I think has really come up for me a lot working in very, very, very applied research settings. When you talk about messy real life data, yes, that is my life. So working with the violence prevention program that is trying to use data to improve their street outreach, that is a real life messy data situation that there's not necessarily a perfectly valid and reliable instrument to use. So having to work with stakeholders to create tools that are useful to them and are rigorous at the same time is a big part of what I do and what I have done. I would also say being fluent in statistics has been really important. I think Dr. Levin, who was our first speaker at the McCormick Foundation, alluded to this, that she's often called upon to kind of interpret or present findings from either other statistical analyses or to kind of make sense of data that's being presented and to make sense in a way that's approachable and consumable by people who are not data experts. That's really a really important skill set that I've had to develop. Although I really love the advanced statistics classes I was able to take here, I unfortunately don't get to use a lot of hierarchical linear modeling in my day-to-day, but it's nice that I have had that experience, and because I like that type of stuff, it was an enjoyable class anyway. So I think those are some of the big things I wanted to cover. I think that if you're somebody who enjoys working with people who are not measurement and evaluation professionals, I have a great job. I get to work with people every day who either have been burned by research and evaluation before, which is very common and very unfortunate, but true, especially for people of color or people in communities that have been disinvested in. Research is not something that they're eager to participate in or have had good experiences with, and it's important that we try to change that conversation by changing the way that we approach research and evaluation. So that has been something that I'm really passionate about. But at the same time, I don't get to work with a lot of people who are as interested in non-parametric statistics or measurement theory as I do. So, being in school and working at the same time was a really great experience for me to have that group. And I think if you're going to go into a field where you are going to be kind of a lone wolf, creating those peer groups or finding the way to kind of stay current and keep your skills current is really important, and to have other people to have those conversations with. So.
Thanks, Katie. I have a longer history with most of the other folks on the panel. I'm curious, do you remember how you found the MESA program when you were searching out for?
Yeah, I was trying to find the degree with the longest name.
That's why we call it MESA. It makes it easier.
I think I Googled it. I mean, I think it really came up in a Google search. I was looking for research methodology, stats evaluation courses. So that's another thing. If you're interested in evaluation, there are not actually a ton of evaluation programs out there, and there's not. I mean, again, there's no some. I'm thinking, there's some universities in California that have dedicated program evaluation courses. Western Michigan University has a really strong evaluation track. But as far as looking for more experience and exposure to evaluation, you're not going to find a dedicated evaluation program.
And I mean, as we were talking with Becca, that's one reason, given the demand there,
Yep.
especially in the Chicago area, that's one reason why our new faculty member, Rebecca Tisdale, is going to be rolling out a couple of those extra program evaluation courses over the next couple of years.
Yeah, and I think it's important to kind of note that there's a lot of overlap between research and evaluation, but they're not the same thing. Evaluation is its own field. It has its own frameworks and approaches, and luckily I took a wonderful course, an excellent program evaluation course that Dr. Myford taught here. I still refer to my binder, my Google Docs, all the time for that, but it really opened my eyes to the evaluation field, and kind of showed me really just the breadth and depth of that field on its own.
Questions for, sounds like you're running into some of the same issues in these communities as Rebecca was.
Yeah, I agree with everything that she said about the needs, and that the field needs to change, and we need to change perceptions about the field. And I think it's happening slowly, and I welcome that.
Questions for Katie? No?
All right.
Okay, thanks, Katie. Jen?
All right. My name is Jen Sweet. I'm the Director of Assessment at DePaul University. So my job is pretty different, I think, than a lot of other people's jobs, in that I require a lot of knowledge. Everything I learned in Mesa was critical to be able to do, because really what I need is the biggest toolkit I can possibly have, right? Because I work with faculty to assess their own programs. And for the most part, most faculty don't have much measurement training. They probably have some training in research. They probably do research and publish. And that's why I need to be able to work with fields where faculty are using qualitative models and quantitative models, and I need to be able to suggest new sort of innovative things to anyone, regardless of what they're trying to measure. So I work a lot on my own skills, and really the most valuable thing Mesa did for me is it made me capable of picking up all these things, of going out and learning all these new models, because if there isn't a measurement model a faculty member feels fits for them, they won't do assessment. So I have to go be creative, and I borrow from evaluation. I beg, borrow, and steal everything. And sometimes I just make stuff up. And then usually when you make stuff up, you go out and do a little more research and find out somebody made that up like 30 years ago. That thing you thought you just made up. But, and then I keep updating. I work primarily with faculty. I don't necessarily do the measurement. I help faculty develop their own measurement models. Really, assessment of student learning is what I'm primarily in charge of. Although I work with all the areas of assessment across the university, I'm only in charge of academic assessment. So every single program at every single university everywhere, they have to assess their students' learning. It's part of the regional accreditation requirements. So I work with individual programs to help them first develop learning outcomes. So what are the outcomes of your program beyond like they're going to get knowledge of something or they're going to understand things? And it can be very difficult for faculty to define what it is. Like they know, but it's like operationalizing your variables in research. It's hard when you get to that point. So I work a lot with faculty to help them first write good learning outcomes, and then assess the learning outcomes. And then I work at the institutional level with the much harder like job of making sure all the pieces are moving together and everybody's getting done what they need to get done, so that when our regional accreditor shows up every 10 years, we have the evidence we need to show them that we have been engaging in this process in an ongoing basis, and that not just that we're measuring, but that we're doing something when we get results with the results of our measurement to improve student learning. So I work a lot with consultation. So a lot of my job is faculty just call me up and say, we know we want to measure this outcome. We're not really sure how to measure it, and we have these ideas. And they lay out their ideas, and I was like, that would take like 10 years. Like, you need to figure out. So I help them sort of narrow down so that they can find some useful piece of information that they can do. They only have 1 year, that they can do in 1 year to learn something, even if it's not the entirety of that learning outcome that they had defined. At least they can find out some useful information they can act on that's related to that outcome. So I do a lot of consultation, and the other major thing I do is I do a lot of training. So in that I work with our faculty development team on training in measurement, assessment, and just generally I work with faculty on how to integrate assessment into the teaching and learning process, so that we stop thinking about teaching, learning, and assessment as like 3 different things that happen separately. They're all one process and they happen together, which is a little bit trickier. So I've been working a lot lately on something our national organization has been working on as well, and that is assessment for learning instead of assessment of learning. A very traditional assessment model is like, how do you write a test? How do you figure out what students learned? So assessment for learning is, how do you make assessment part of the learning process, which is a little bit trickier. And I've been working a lot on that recently. Is there anything?
Well, I think more broadly in Jen's field, I mean, if you look at the job ads, like I do every Sunday morning, if there's like everything from a community college all the way up to D1 universities like us have it'll be called something different, assessment office, institutional effectiveness office. And when folks are looking, oh, where are the jobs in Mesa? I think the number one area that I see are these offices, the assessment offices, the evaluation of offices, the effectiveness offices. So if you have the flexibility to, there might not be one in Chicago, but if you have the flexibility to move geographically, I think that's probably the top area where there's the number one amount of openings.
Yeah, there's currently several in Chicago. So.
Yeah. There always will be.
So-
Yeah, I mean,
so-
but
so there's-
I mean, just
there's-
nationwide, there's just a
Yeah,
lot of
there's tons of jobs, and part of the issue is that hardly anyone even knows that this happens, that it exists. I mean, most of you are probably students, and you probably don't know that this is happening, but I guarantee it is because this is an accredited school.
Right. You have to report to somebody.
Yeah. So
Another related field, I think, is for school districts. Like CPS, they have a small army of researchers, but not every district's going to have the resources of a CPS to hire all these people. So even the smaller school districts, they'll have at least one person, potentially two, running a district assessment office. I know when I first moved into my district, I found out who the assessment coordinator was, and I called him, wanted a meeting, because I have two kids. And he was smart. He looked me up before he met me, so he knew who I was. And but his degree was in clinical psych. So you have someone running a fairly large school district's assessment office who's got a degree in clinical psych. Good guy, decent background, not going to have the same background as a Mesa person running an assessment office. So we do have other students, graduates of ours, in these assessment offices at different districts. So that's another, I think, area that's not represented up here that I wish was, but there's opportunities in that field as well if you want to stick in education in the K-12 part aspect of it. I think Jen's is more higher ed, right, Jen? For
Yeah,
community
mine is
colleges
higher
all the
ed.
way through D1.
And I will say, if you are a person that really likes the numbers and really likes working with the numbers, but also really enjoys working with people, that's how I got into it. Because I love the research and the evaluation and the statistical analysis. Like, I geek out about that stuff, and I love doing it, but I could never give up like a deep connection with people. And probably some of the evaluation people would say the same thing, right?
But there's opportunities for people that want nothing to do with other people as
Yes.
well. There's plenty of those opportunities as well.
Yes.
Questions for Jen regarding higher ed? Yeah.
What you described sounds a lot like learning experience design and instructional design.
We're in the same office.
So yeah, because like
It's not normal, but at DePaul, the instructional designers are in the same office as I am.
in instructional design, they usually like in many places they just make you do like Photoshop stuff and like pretty stuff, but like the instructional design and learning experience design has a foundation of designing, learning, and building learning objectives and a whole experience that is consistent to that, which sounds like.
Yes, yeah, it's very related. I mean, to the point that more and more universities are actually putting those functions together. They're frequently called centers for teaching. Ours is called the Center for Teaching and Learning, but that is exactly why. So either assessment will go be lumped in with like institutional research or something like that, and it'll be called like an institutional effectiveness office. Or I've seen more and more that universities are going instead to a model of putting it in with instructional designers, faculty development, and those kinds of functions, and then calling it like a center for teaching or a center for teaching and learning. The one is a center for teaching and research excellence, but it'll be something like that because it's integrating these educational models, developmental models, with assessment.
I think if you're going into instructional design, that's more the A part of Mesa, the assessment part. Whereas Jen, I think, has a little bit broader scope. You got the ME and MENS in there as well. But I think, yeah, there's definitely some overlap in there.
Yeah.
Some other questions for Jen and or any of the panel members, or for myself? Yep.
My question is for Andrew. I know you mentioned that AIR has like a wide variety of like employees, and I obviously heard a lot of people talk about Mesa, but I'm wondering from like the HDO perspective of the PhD program, like what jobs or roles would be available, or what types of things do people who come from just the HDL aspect of it can do at AIR or any of you all?
Well, I can talk about AIR a little bit, and HDL wasn't here when I was here. It's Human Development and Learning, is that right? Okay. So a number of my colleagues have degrees in human development. There's a program at Northwestern University, Human Development and Social Policy, that a few of my colleagues came from. But I also work with people who have degrees in adolescent development and things like that. And so those folks they're working in research, and they have a general research background, but we work as part of, and so folks that have a strong research background and can write and lead their own projects absolutely do that. But there's also a role for folks to work as part of a team in those fields, because we have folks who are dedicated research design and statisticians, right, or computer programmers, things like that, and data collectors. So you can focus on the research questions that are interesting to you, the partnerships that you want to build with external organizations to write grants or to evaluate their programs. So yeah, there's an opportunity there. And I'll pass it on to the folks who actually...
But if you have a PhD in HDL, I mean, like you, Jung, if you get the master's in Mesa at the same time, I think in a place like AIR, then wouldn't that open up? No, I keep on calling it AIR. I'm sorry. I know you guys hate that, but I just do. I've done that since grad school, but I can't help it. Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, but would there be more doors open for folks that have the combination of skills?
Absolutely. I mean, there's it's more corporate speak, but there's multiple tracks to be successful at AIR, and one is a technical track, and that is, I'm a really good qualitative researcher, I'm a really good statistician, or something like that. There's management, I want to lead research studies, and then there's the content side, where I am going to become known within and outside the organization as an expert in this field. And I think, from the organization's perspective, that's the most valuable. So I'm sitting in a technical role going, hey, you need psychometricians and statisticians. They're like, yeah, we got a lot of them. But does anyone know who you are in the field of youth development? Right. No, I'm like the fifth author. I did all the analysis, but I'm not the person that knows the content area. So absolutely, the content is hugely valuable.
And I would also mention and add that there are organizations like Riverside Testing Publishers that do a lot of developmental assessments, and so they hire people with human development background who work then with the psychometricians and statisticians on the design of those types of assessments. So if you look very specifically at particular types of testing organizations and where their niche is, you'll find places like Riverside that have a place for developmental psychologists.
Yep, that's a good point. Thanks, Carol. Any other questions for anybody?
And I want to add one other area that you guys haven't talked about.
Okay.
And that's working in government.
I had that down here, but I didn't.
I can speak to that.
Yep, sure.
Because one of my first jobs before I came to academia was to work for the state merit system of personnel administration for the state of Georgia. And in that capacity, I was working in exam research and development, doing job analyses of different state jobs, laying out what the knowledge, skills, and abilities and understandings were that were required in order to perform particular jobs, and then building assessments to determine whether the candidates who were applying for those jobs had those knowledge, skills, and abilities. So there are lots of jobs in state government, in federal government, in city government, for people who are interested in learning to do job analyses and then develop assessments for
and it doesn't have to,
policemen.
Right, because it's not necessarily just in education. The skills that you get are transferable to regardless if you're doing educational research or some other social science or healthcare research. But yeah, state governments, I I sometimes get contacted by the feds. They're looking for people, because I specialize, like Sean mentioned earlier, in ROSH models. Like, I think the FDA sent me an ad a while back looking for a ROSH person. It's like, I have no interest in working for the government, so I pass that along to the Mesa listserv. But there's lots of opportunities in both local, state, and federal government agencies as well. So thanks for reminding me, Carol. Anything else, folks? Got a few more minutes. No? Marisha, do you want to wrap it up, or do you want to just call it? Okay. Well, thanks for everybody for coming out. Thank you for the panel for showing up again. I really appreciate you coming back to share with the future of the research field. Thanks again.
Thank you.